Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Overcoming Graduation with Brian Drury. For anyone who's listening for the first time, Overcoming Graduation is a podcast all about teaching you everything you need to know about life in order to live the life of your dreams. Now I do this by interviewing incredible, wonderful, crazy, quirky people who have overcome graduation in unique and exciting ways. I share their stories with you to show you that there is no set path in life and you can make anything happen if you're willing to work for it. Now, my guest today to share the Overcoming Graduation message is named Mindie Kniss, and she has an absolutely incredible story that starts with her having a passion as a child to go and visit Kenya. She couldn't explain why, she didn't really quite know where this came from, but she knew that at some point in her life, she had to get there. When she, in the process of making this dream a reality, she went to school, she went to university, and found herself really not clicking with it so much. She could ace the test but wasn't a big fan of homework, so when it came time for her to pick a major, she essentially just asked the counselor, where do I have the most credits? Then later in her story went on to do a master's and a PhD in metaphysics at the same time in a joint program. And then continuing, went to work at a Fortune 100 company in the United States and found that the golden handcuffs were getting a little too heavy and restraining her more than she really wanted and weren't allowing her to move towards her dreams. So then she struck out into the coaching world with very little experience or background knowledge in running a business. And shortly after that, had to declare bankruptcy with over $100,000 in debt. Her home was foreclosed upon. She lost her apartment. For a short time, had to sleep in her office. Then she tells the turnaround story of how she went on to learn all of the things that she needed to run a successful business. She even shares her best advice on what she wished she would have known back when she started her first business, for anyone out there like me who is starting their own business. And in this story, she has so many nuggets of knowledge and wisdom that lead up to her current career of being a heart intelligence expert, an author, and running the Heartpath series, which is an event that she runs that combines her love of heart intelligence, of hardcore science, and of getting out in nature and connecting with yourself. So Mindie is going to discuss in this interview how the beauty of being an entrepreneur is your ability to combine all of the things you love to create your unique gift and your unique just message in the world. So this one has something for everybody. Mindie is a fantastic person and a great new friend in my life. So I'm very excited to share her story with you, and please let me introduce you to Mindie Kniss. Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Overcoming Graduation with Brian Drury. So today, I always start off by saying I'm excited, but the guest that I have for you, if you're having any doubts or frustrations about finding out your passion or your purpose, well, my guest tonight is named Mindie Kniss, and that is her specialty. So Mindie Kniss coaches entrepreneurs to level up their clarity, courage, and confidence by tapping into the power of their heart. So she is a PhD, an award-winning humanitarian, creator of Core Coach Training Academy, founder of the Heartpath Retreat Series, and CEO of Radius LLC. She also has published one ebook, which you can find at her website, mindiekniss.com, and has co-written, or was the co-author on another book called Wake Up Women, Be Happy, Healthy, and Wealthy. So Mindie, I don't think you've done enough because I just almost ran out of breath reading all of the amazing things you're involved with. So thank you for being on the show.
Well, thanks for inviting me on the show, Brian. It's an honor to be here.
I'm so glad to have you, and it's funny because for all the listeners, when I was talking to Mindie and telling her about what my podcast is about, like basically she just kind of was like, Brian, come on, look, all right, I'm here. And I was like, oh, you mean you'd want to be it? She's like, of course I'd want to be. I just ask people, just go for it. So Mindie gave me a good lesson in just saying, go for it, don't hold back. So thank you for that, Mindie. But
of course,
Mindie's story goes back a little bit before graduation. So many times when we're starting these interviews, we'll start right around graduation and see what a person studied, how they felt, and what their first steps into the quote-unquote real world looked like. But Mindie's story started at a much earlier age with a deep burning desire and passion. So Mindie, if you can start us off by taking us through that part of your story, and what was that passion that started this whole amazing journey of your life?
Well, thank you for that. And what started everything really was really an understanding of what my desire was. My desire was to go to Kenya, and there was no real reason for that in terms of logical reasons. I wanted to go to Kenya for as long as I can remember, and I was just fascinated with the people, the place, the culture, everything about it, so much so that in my family it became a big joke. And my sister, one year for Christmas, I was given a calendar of African art. And my sister started laughing after I opened it. And she's like, "Oh yeah, we're just taking you back to your roots," which is ridiculous because I had never been to Africa. I didn't know anybody from Kenya, and really for most of my life, I didn't even know anyone that had been to Kenya. So to have grasped onto that desire, that passion, for whatever reason, was kind of strange. But
and where
I
are you
continued
from?
To follow it.
Where are you from originally, Mindie?
I grew up, born and raised in Chicago.
Okay, so in Chicago, all right.
Yep, Midwest.
So just beautiful, warm weather, white sand beaches, of course. Yes, that's.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how I think of it. So growing up all through high school and even all through college, there were a variety of times where I attempted to go to Kenya. There were a few, probably 3, I believe, during college that there would be trips that would be planned. One of them was a mission trip through my college. One of them was another work project type of trip. And I was so excited because I'm like, oh, it's finally gonna be my time. I get to go to Kenya. And then for whatever reason, one after the other kept canceling, or the leader got sick, or I didn't have enough money to go, or something happened where I wasn't able to go. So it took me until my early 20s. I was already out of college the first time that I was able to go to Kenya, but have since been back 3 times and actually lived there the last time I was there.
That's fantastic. And so for the listeners, what you're going to hear as a recurring theme in Mindie's story is about the dream that you have, the passion that you have, that big burning desire. It is possible. So even in just this just beginning of the interview, you can see that Mindie had this desire from a young age, and it wasn't built in like, oh, well, there's a job and money or this or that. It was just this burning desire deep in her heart, which I firmly believe we all have, and sometimes we're not willing to admit. But it's there, and it's also possible. So we're going to continue to go through how Mindie made that possible, and also how she's grown and done so many other different things in her life to enable her to do that and do so much more, touch many more people's lives. So, Mindie, can you tell us about when you first went to school, and what did you study the first time around when you did your undergraduate degree?
So my undergrad was from a tiny school in Colorado called Colorado Christian University. And I'll tell you why I went there. Most people, I studied theology, and people would say to me, oh, do you want to become a minister? Do you want to work in a church? And I would say, no, not really. The whole reason I went there was because I wasn't a great student. I was that type of kid that in high school could ace all the tests but refused to do homework. So my grade point average was just that, average. And so I wasn't getting into all these really fancy schools that a lot of my friends from the North Shore of Chicago were getting into. And my mother, because I wasn't, this stellar student, my mother said to me, well, you should probably go to a college somewhere in the Midwest. And I thought, no way. I'm getting the heck out of here as far away as I possibly can. So I got it in my head that if I applied to and was accepted at a small Christian school, that she would allow me to go there because it was, it was tiny, and they would probably take care of me better than at a big public university. So I really didn't even apply to that many schools, but I did apply to this one in Colorado, was accepted, and ended up going there. And really, the way that I chose my degree, my major, was because it was the beginning of my senior year. And my advisor said, Mindie, are you planning to get out of here this year? Like, would you like to graduate within 4 years? And I said, yes, absolutely, because my parents had also told me that they would assist me to some extent. I also had my own student loans, and I was working full time. But to some extent, they would say, we're going to help you for 4 years, but that's it. And I was like, well, then I need to get out of there for 4 years. That's what's happening, no matter what.
Right.
So my advisor said, well, unless you choose something, you're not going to graduate. So I asked her, I said, well, what do I have the most credits in? Like, what am I closest to? She said, well, a theology degree. So I said, well, then that's what it's going to be. So,
see, I love these stories of how college majors are decided, because I remember, it's only 3 years since I've graduated, and I remember being in school. I remember my process, and it was just kind of like, well, I know I'm going to have big loans, and I really want to travel, and this seems like it'd be a good major to help me travel.
Right.
And so many other people, many of the other people I've interviewed on the show, one guy said, the girl that I really liked was going to be a chiropractor, so I decided I would be a chiropractor. And
totally, that's how it works out.
And it's fantastic because I think it's such a great message for anyone who's at that point of deciding or who's worried about the decision they made, because they think like, oh my God, what if I blow this? What if I make the wrong decision for the rest of my life? But in reality,
that's not possible.
Right.
There is no wrong decision.
Mm-hmm. And it's just a first step, and even something that doesn't turn out how you thought or figured at all can be used as an amazing lesson to build you and grow you, or it can just be something that you choose to keep as and I remember reading in your about that it's the stories we tell ourselves. So it's all about the way that you frame and decide to tell that story in your life. So all right, I love that. So you picked theology and you said that's what I'm going to graduate with, and can you take us to the next step?
Sure. I do want to make one point about that.
Absolutely.
I had started as a psychology major. That's when I entered school. I said, I'm going to be a psych major. I took my first psychology class and thought, this stuff sucks. I don't like this at all. Now, what's funny about that is I do tons of psychology in my work. I mean, it is essentially the big majority of what I do as a coach. And I've studied it, basically since then. But the structure, how it was set up at my school, I didn't like that. Mm-hmm. So even if there's something that people are thinking about, oh, well, I majored in this, but I really want to do this. School is like just a piece of the puzzle, and it's a good piece. I'm a big proponent of higher education and all that stuff, but it's just one piece. So I want to just encourage your listeners to remember that. Mm-hmm. So going forward, I then went essentially into work. I thought that I'd go to grad school pretty quickly, but I started working in the corporate world. I worked at a Fortune 100 company. Mm-hmm. And really quickly got very comfortable with the salary, with the benefits, with the lifestyle mm-hmm. of that world. And I remember speaking to my very first boss, and he said, Mindie, there's something called the golden handcuffs. And I was like, that will never happen to me.
Right.
It will not, because I have all these passions. I know this isn't what I want to do with my life, so I'm going to work here for a couple years. And then I'm going to go, seek my adventure and fortune elsewhere. Mm-hmm. Well, 7 years later.
Wow.
Yeah, it happens very easily. So 7 years I was with this company. And at the end of that, I was on a fellowship living in Nairobi for about 8 months. And this was a corporate fellowship. So through my company, I was able to do this really neat project mm-hmm. over there. And I decided, this is it. I need to go do something else. So I decided through a whole variety of different things that when I got back to the U.S., I was going to do two things. One was apply to grad school for writing. Now, this was a big risk because I didn't do writing as an undergrad and hadn't really done a lot of writing over the course of my life mm-hmm. until that point. So there was one school that I wanted to go to, and I thought, if I don't get in there, I'm just not going to go. So I'm just going to apply to this one school in Oregon. It was Pacific University in Oregon. Mm-hmm. They had this amazing MFA program in creative writing. And I thought, if that doesn't work out, then I'm just not meant to do that. But right. Thankfully, it did work out. So went there for an MFA. And simultaneously, I was also starting a joint program that was a master's and PhD program. So I was kind of doing a lot all at the same time, which I know a lot of your listeners will do as well, because we're all passionate people. There's a lot mm-hmm. of things we're interested in. And so why not do it all?
And I love that point that you brought up, because one of the biggest misconceptions that I had coming out of school, and that I think many people do, is that, again, you're picking this thing and you have to be this one thing. But none of us are one thing or one idea or one passion or pursuit. We all have so many varied interests and diverse types of things that we want to try and experience. And so when people try to put themselves into one little box, it can be so confining. I mean, even the golden handcuffs is like, even when you're comfortable, but you're not exploring, you're not getting out of your comfort zone, it leads to a life that just gets very monotonous very quickly. And although comfort can be good, it can be very dangerous and a trap. And also, I wanted to call out, just for the listeners, because I read Mindie's about earlier, and I also have it up as well. It's MFA is Master of Fine Arts, for anyone who is not familiar. So she got her MFA in creative writing. and was simultaneously working on a joint program. So that's pretty amazing. I don't know if I've ever heard of that, where so you were getting your master's and in a joint PhD program?
Well, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't really recommend it, quite honestly.
So you were super relaxed and like lots of free time and...
Yeah, it's not something I would recommend. The reality is I didn't really do that much stuff for that joint program while I was doing the MFA stuff, because that essentially took all of my time.
Right.
Now, so that I graduated with the MFA in 2009. I didn't finish my PhD until, let me think about what year that was. I want to say 2013. Mm-hmm. So it was a number of years later till I finally got the dissertation wrapped up and all that stuff complete. But it is, I think people get confused, and I want to go back to what you were just talking about, how we're not just one thing and we don't have just one passion. Mm-hmm. It can be confusing because when you talk to people that say, oh, you have to pick one topic or one niche or one thing, that is true in terms of marketing yourself as an entrepreneur. It's really a lot easier if you do have that one thing selected or one topic or one area of expertise. But that doesn't mean that in your whole life you have to pick one thing. So I want to make that distinction, because in marketing and speaking your business message out into the world, yeah, it is a lot easier if you do pick one thing. And it can be hard to do that when you're multi-passionate like I am.
Right. And what I think is a really key point there, because this was a hard lesson for me to learn, because I had heard you and Sean and so many other people talking about marketing and being super, super specific. And I was like, but I want to help everybody.
Yes.
Like I want to reach out and connect with everybody. I don't want to leave anybody out. And I believe it was Ramit Sethi was talking about trying to appeal to everyone. And he goes, so say you're selling a clothing line and you try to market to everyone. So that means you're showing a cool teenager in the clothes and a grandpa in the clothes. And he goes, and if you show both of those, it's going to appeal to nobody, because no one really knows who you're trying to be or what it is you're trying to do. So so for the listeners, if you have an idea or a business, this is something I've heard. I mean, and if Mindie's saying it, you can trust her because she's a kick-ass entrepreneur. But from my limited research and using her as I'm just pivoting off of her information, but it is so key to clearly, specifically define for your marketing, because when you can say my target market is 21 to 23-year-old recent college grads who are in this area looking at this, it allows you to just laser focus, because in the world of just inundation of information that we have, it is so easy to just scroll past something. But when you can write something and create something and mold it in a way that speaks exactly to that person, when they're scrolling or when they're clicking through sites, they're going to stop on that and hopefully read and get involved. Now, Mindie, before we dive into your dissertation, because I'm fascinated to learn more about this, could you explain what theology is? Because I honestly do not know.
Theology essentially is the study of God.
Okay.
And the way that I looked at that was I did two things as kind of my two main focus points. One was comparative religion, because I was really fascinated. If we're all talking about this idea of God, how does it come across in such various ways around the world? So I looked at a lot of religions and different forms of spirituality and trying to understand, what is it that we're all trying to talk about, and are we talking about the same thing, or is it actually a different thing, and how do we experience that? So that was part of it. And then I really spent a lot of time looking at the ancient aspects of these various religions. So we studied things like ancient Greek and ancient Hebrew, the languages, and then we did all kinds of everything from archaeological studies to, we actually went on a tour of the Holy Land, where we went through Greece, Egypt, Israel, and Jordan, looking at these ancient sites and studying, doing research on them, and then presenting our research on site at that actual place. So that was really cool as well. But to me, it's just, like I said, I love everything. I love learning.
I love everything.
I do. I'm a lifelong student, and so to me, there's so many different things. And what I love about that is that all of that contributes to what I do today. Not necessarily directly, but absolutely indirectly.
And for the listeners, this is something, and Mindie, this is something I always call out, but if you listen to the way that Mindie is speaking and you hear the energy coming through her voice, it's getting me pumped up, and I'm sure it's getting you pumped up too, and that is the type of enthusiasm and energy you will have when you're talking about the things you love. So recognize that moment, that tipping point where all of a sudden you're just filled with energy when you are exhausted, or you are fired up and just talking and it feels like it's just coming through you. That is a great sign and an indicator that you're talking about something that you should be spending a lot more time doing. So now, Mindie, when you finished your PhD in 2013, you wrote your dissertation on the science of heart intelligence. So can you please share with the listeners a little bit about what heart intelligence, I mean, I'm sure you could share a lot of it. You wrote your dissertation.
Yeah, how much time do we have, Brian?
So, you can cancel your dinner with your husband because we're going to burn the midnight oil on this one. All right, so
deep on this.
Yes, so a little bit about heart intelligence and what this dissertation was really discussing.
Sure, I'd love to do that. So heart intelligence is based on the new science called neurocardiology. That's the scientific way of talking about this. And what it is, in essence, is we used to think, I don't know about you, Brian, but when I was in school, which I'm probably about 10 or so years older than a lot of your listeners. I'm 36 right now. Mm-hmm. And when I was in school, everybody was taught that the brain controls the whole body and sends messages down throughout the body through the nervous system and into the various organs.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that was it. Well, what they're finding now is that that's not entirely true. The heart actually has its own intelligence and is able to make decisions and is able to communicate with the brain and other organs of the body very similarly how we used to think that the brain we thought that was just the guy in charge.
Right.
What they found in neurons, which used to be known as, quote, brain cells, there are actually neurons in the heart as well, as there are in other parts of the body, but there's a distinct mass of them in the heart, so much so that they actually call that the little brain in the heart.
Wow.
Right. So if you look at this idea that the heart has this intelligence and can make decisions and is really running the show in a lot of ways. I'll give you one example. People oftentimes in meditation say, okay, focus on your breath, pay attention to your breathing, and then that will begin to relax the rest of your body. Well, it's actually completely the opposite. It's the heart that controls the respiratory system. So if you just were to focus on your heart and bringing down that heart rate, that then would increase the relaxation over the rest of the body.
Well, I know what I'm doing with my meditation tomorrow. We're doing it all wrong all this time, just lying on the floor.
Yeah,
okay.
Focus on the heart. And actually, if you're interested in it, Brian, and I'm happy to share this with your listeners as well, I do a meditation that is focused on that, really changing your awareness from in the head to the heart, which is what this is all about, like getting out of this mind chatter, this constant, all the stuff that's in the head, like fears, insecurities, all that negative thinking, none of that exists in the heart. So if you can just learn to get underneath that, you can actually move forward in your life much more powerfully, purposefully, and efficiently if you're not weighed down by all those crazy obstacles that we're putting, that are constantly going in our head.
Right. Yeah, and I actually remember, so for the listeners, I was at a conference where Mindie presented and did a quick little meditation with us, just kind of give us a sample, and it was all centered around this type of mentality, because so often it's like when people say go with your gut, I feel like a lot of times it's go with your heart. It's trust your intuition. It's trust that internal guidance and that knowing. And many times we're so in our head that we're trying to calculate and reason, and there's so many things in life that are not meant to be calculated. It's like, just go for it. Just trust the heart. Like, that's the terminology we use. And I remember after the meditation, she said, all right, you might notice that you're seeing colors a little brighter and that you're more relaxed and that you feel more at peace, and all of those things were true. So it's very interesting, yeah, and I think we can definitely share that with the listeners because I'm sure many people would love to try that. Are you saying to do it live, or do you have kind of a recording of it?
No, I have a recording that I will
perfect.
send to you, and you can put a link and they can access that if they're interested.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'll include that with the show notes for the interview once this goes live. So
Awesome.
Okay, so and a little bit more, I'm really curious about heart intelligence. So now that we have these, they're discovering that we have these neurons, almost this mini brain in our heart, and that much of the control of other functions within the body is dictated by the heart, not the brain, or they're working in tandem. What are some of the biggest discoveries or biggest changes in medicine or the way that we view the body that have come about as a result of this discovery?
Yeah, I'll tell you about one of the coolest ones. You actually mentioned the word intuition. Most people think that intuition comes in through the head from maybe a higher source or some kind of unconscious, the collective unconscious from somewhere in the universe. However, what they have determined is, and I'll tell you about the experiment that they did in terms of how they figured this out. People were attached to all the different body sensing monitors, like an EEG, EKG, and a variety of other types of things that can measure their body reactions. And they were shown on a video screen in front of them a variety of random images. Now, these images were completely randomized by the computer, so neither the experimenter nor the experimentee knew which image was coming up next.
Okay.
And about 3/4 of those images were something completely normal that does not evoke an emotional response. For instance, a table or a cup or, somebody's lawn, like just random pictures of things, a landscape maybe. But the other 1/4 of those images were designed to create an emotional response. So that might have been a snake that was ready to strike, or it might have been a bloody body, a corpse on the street somewhere. So it creates this visceral, this reaction in us. And because those people were all hooked up to the monitors to test where everything was coming from, the experimenters found that the body was able to react 4.75 seconds before the emotional image. So what I'm saying is that before the thing showed up on the screen, their body was already having a visceral reaction to that emotional image. And they were able to trace that to where? The heart. So the heart is where the intuition comes in. Something about that connection that they had to some greater knowledge was able to inform their body that, whoa, watch out, get prepared because there's going to be this emotional thing coming. Now, that's not cognitive. I'm talking about precognitive. So the body responds, and then it goes up to cognition where they're seeing the image and thinking, oh my gosh, or having whatever reaction they have. But fascinating stuff. So like I said, 4.7 seconds prior to the image even existing on the screen.
That is amazing. And that reminds me, what I've often talked to people about, like when I'm talking about what Vishen Lakhiani calls being in flow, and when everything's going right, it's you're not in your head a lot. You're feeling, it's like if you've ever been on a trip, or like when for the listeners, you think back to like one of the best days you ever had with your friends. Like you weren't like thinking and calculating and, all right, well, if we strategically time things, like you were just going with it. And something about this flow of energy, like something about going to that restaurant felt right, and something about talking to that girl felt right, and everything just seems to fall into place. So what Mindie is talking about is both a very scientific, but also very it can touch in both of the hardcore science and the extreme kind of woo-woo spiritual out there stuff, but it all comes and blends together. And so that's what Mindie is doing, is connecting both of those pieces from the really kind of hypothetical or out there to the deep science. And when she says stuff like this, I'm like, I've experienced that, where just suddenly I knew I shouldn't go down that alley, or wait, I need to look to the left because I think a car is coming. Like you just have this feeling, and that's in your heart. That's not up in the head. So that's fascinating stuff. So now you've done your dissertation in heart intelligence, on the science of heart intelligence, and you have your PhD in metaphysics. Which, could you explain a little bit about what metaphysics is as well?
Yeah, so I loved what you were just saying about how heart intelligence really does span both sides. There's the science of it and the spirit of it. And that to me is my favorite part about it, because I am at heart a skeptic. I want to know why things work or why they are. And yet I am a huge believer in things like intuition and things like that used to not be able to be tested or understood from a rational and logical level. So I really love that science nowadays is just beginning to be able to meet spirituality in terms of proving its existence or its truth, which is really fun for me because I like to work with a lot of skeptical people. And it's like, hey, I was skeptical too, and here's the evidence, here's the research, and then you can make your own decision as to how you want to proceed with that information. But it's very, very fun for me to, especially when people come to Heartpath and they're like, I don't believe any of this, I'm an atheist. I'm like, cool, whatever, that's fine. But here's all the stuff, and let's see what you feel. And that is, I have a guy that's come to Heartpath a few different times now. He keeps coming back every year. And the first year, he said, we did a few of the meditations, and he said, well, I didn't get anything out of this. Like, I didn't feel anything. And I said, that's fine. That's cool. To me, that I'm not going to take that personally by any means. That's just what your experience was, and that's great. Well, then he came back the next year, and we did a meditation, and the guy just starts crying. And I'm like, hey, what's going on with you over there? And he was like, I get it. I get it. I'm like, yeah. It's so fun when people, open to that experience. So this idea of looking at the science, looking at the spirit, looking at this whole big thing is essentially what metaphysics to me is, because the idea of meta is it's beyond physics, or it's above somewhere that we are not able to test. Everything in physics you can test, unless it's theoretical physics, of course. But this idea of metaphysics is above and beyond that which we can explain or even have research to test it, or the tools, the technology to test it. So metaphysics is mostly focused around spirituality and spiritual experiences. People that are very involved with that would be people like shamans, and there's a lot of witch doctors around the world and different types of things, which I'm fascinated from that spirituality context, but also from the archaeological context and their sociological context. So really, really fascinating stuff. Metaphysics covers a whole huge breadth of topics, but I really focused in on a person having a spiritual experience. So we are at once human beings and yet spiritual beings, and what do we do with that?
And what I love about this is, again, where back in was it 2006, you graduated in 2000 with a theology degree, and then 13 years later, whereas at 2000 there might have been like, well, I like studying it and it's interesting to me, but how's this gonna, like so many people say, well, how are you gonna make money doing it, right? Like,
right,
how are you gonna make this a career? And then you just keep seeing this weave back in, and this study of religion, study of spirituality, and then how that has influenced your growth. And then also, you're bringing in the writing, you're bringing in another skill to help you share and learn and understand better. And then you get deep into the science of it with the PhD. And now you've got this huge range of, and I love when seemingly unrelated things tie together, where something that, oftentimes, like many people that I interview go like, yeah, I thought it was useless, or I thought my degree had nothing to do, and then 6 or 7 years later, it turned out to be so useful and helped me launch my business or helped me meet my wife or whatever. So
and that's why I say you never can choose the wrong thing. People say, oh, well, how do I get on the right path? You're always on the right path. You cannot be off of it. So there is no off of the path. You're always on it. And it may feel like there are a lot of diversions or obstacles or whatever, but that doesn't mean you're off your path. You're definitely on it. I have another example for you based on what you were just talking about, which is one of my favorite things about being an entrepreneur.
Bring it on.
You can bring in whatever the heck you want to bring in. So if you're passionate about whatever, you can find a way, and this is what I love to do with my clients. It's like, let's find a way to incorporate that into your work, into your career. So for me, it's wilderness. I used to be a wilderness adventure trip leader and loved going on that stuff. I backpacked through the Rocky Mountains in Wyoming. I biked down the Oregon coast. I've canoed through numerous rivers across the U.S. and have led those types of trips. So that was a great passion of mine. But I didn't see myself doing that as my full-time job, going and joining Outward Bound or something as a career choice, and definitely not now, being married and all this stuff. So it's like, how do I incorporate that? Okay, well, I do these Heartpath retreats, and we go hiking, and we do meditation under the stars, and we spend time in the natural world, in reconnecting to Mother Earth. And that's what's so fun about it for me. It's like, I have this great passion, I can share that with other people, and I can then utilize it as a portion, not the whole, but a portion of this thing that it makes me money and helps people change their lives.
Mm-hmm. And that is a beautiful and just so important lesson for my audience, because, and I mean for me too, and that's the thing, so many times these are part of the reason I love doing these interviews, is this gives me inspiration, this gives me, hope, this gives me all of that, and then that's part of my joy, is getting to share that with the listeners. But in what you're saying, I've heard so many people say, well, I'm going to be a doctor, and I'm going to study biology, I'm going to study all of the necessary things, I'm going to spend years in school, and I have this creative side, but I can't bring that into the job, I can't incorporate it. And so Mindie is giving you guys a perfect example of how when you create your reality, and I don't care what your job is, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're working in a corporate environment, when you create your reality, and when you start to ask questions like, how can I work that in, versus just telling yourself it'll never happen and I can't be happy, all of a sudden your brain is an incredible problem solver, and also your heart now, because we know that thinks too. Oh yeah, I got you, Mindie.
Good job.
Your brain and heart are incredible problem solvers. And so as human beings, we love to try and solve problems. Like, think about in a movie, you're trying to figure out who did it or what's going to happen. We're so curious naturally and kind of like at our core, and many of us can get that beaten out of us, or just told like, oh, well, curiosity only leads to pain, so just ignore that. But when you embrace your curiosity, and when you find ways to incorporate all of the things you love into what you do, you'll find your days, your weeks, your month, there's so much more joy involved. You'll be having the experiences you want. And just like Mindie said, she's able to create this world where she's combining science, spirituality, and the outdoors, which to many people might not sound possible, but Mindie is doing it and has been doing it and has a damn good time doing it. So, all right, so you...
True story.
True story. Yep. That's it.
I do have one thing to clarify based on what you just said.
Yep.
My vision is that when we are, as you said, trying to figure things out, that is the mind. We're trying to think our way through something, whereas the heart just knows.
Right. Yeah, I think that's such an interesting point, because the more, like, what I love to do, one of the ways that I've gotten into interviewing was with all of the flights that I take with work and just personal travel, I talk to people about their dreams. Like, everyone that I meet, like, my goal is to meet at least one new person on any flight or any day I'm flying. And I'll talk to them about that. And it's amazing how when you ask the right questions, you get down to what they want at their core so quickly. And all of the other excuses and rationale and, oh, well, this, it's all in the mind. It's all this kind of barrier that we've created and synthesized to say, like, oh, well, that's not possible, so I'm not even going to try. Or I tried once and failed, so I should never try again. Whereas the heart's like, dude, come on.
It's like, hey, you got this.
Yeah, just go for it. Yeah, trust me, I got you.
Yep.
So this is just so pertinent. It's perfect. Again, you're like, Ryan, just get me on your damn show. So you graduate and you get your PhD in metaphysics, and then what came next? Because what I love is hearing the transitions and the ups and downs, because many times, and I know myself included, especially before I started this podcast, I would look at someone like you and be like, man, she's there. I'm here and she's there, and it's just so far ahead, and I don't even see how it's possible. Like, it's almost like putting a person on a pedestal, but when you hear the story and the progression, it's like, oh, well, they weren't sure, and they took steps, and they made mistakes, and then it almost like opens the door. It's like, dude, you could be doing this right now. So can you tell us a little bit about what came next after graduating with your PhD in metaphysics?
So over the last few years, essentially what I've been doing is just building and growing, mostly by learning about marketing, because I was, as we were talking about earlier, that person who was like, hey, I want to help everyone. If you want to, I'm a great coach, and you should just know that.
Yeah,
like,
just
why should I have to
that
market
would come
that?
to
Come
me.
on.
Yeah.
So I had a really not so wise attitude about that when I started my business, which was in 2007-ish. And I'm going to back up before the graduation of the PhD, because this is a pertinent story. When I got into business, I had left corporate America, and with a pretty cool story briefly on that, I had decided while in Kenya that beyond going to grad school for writing, I also was going to start a business and give myself 1 year to save up some money, hopefully gather up some clients and figure out this whole business thing and then leave corporate America. So that was all in writing, planned out 1 year from the date that I got home. So 2 days before I flew out from Nairobi, there's this big thing happening in Michigan, which is where our company was based, and everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, your company is making a big announcement today. What's going on? What's going on?" I'm like, "I have no idea because I'm in Africa." So somebody please tell me what's going on for my future. As it turned out, our company decided to close our site, which I had worked at. And they said, you guys will all be given a severance or you can relocate with the company. And I said, this is awesome because I already was planning to leave. But It gets even better. And this is where, when you're following your heart, crazy stuff begins to happen, like pure magic stuff. So not only were they closing and I was going to get a severance, but they said, we will give you guys 1 year to decommission the plant, transfer your projects, clean up whatever needs to be cleaned up, and then you can either relocate or get your severance at the end of that 1 year. I'm like, are you kidding me? It was exactly as I wanted it, and it was like they were sending me out the door with a paycheck. It was awesome. So I immediately did a crazy thing, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to move across the country. I was in Michigan at the time, and I'm going to move to Portland, Oregon. Now, I didn't know anybody in Portland, and just had always wanted to live there after biking down the Oregon coast. I really liked the bookstore in Portland, so that that drew me over there. And so I moved to Portland, and really, really quickly, within the first 2 years, things went downhill very fast. And the reason they went downhill was because I truly did not know about marketing. I didn't know what to do to bring in enough clients. So I was essentially living on savings. And then once my savings was gone, I was living on credit cards. And it just racked up the debt, just debt after debt after debt. And overall, I was probably somewhere near $100,000 in debt.
Wow.
My home in Michigan that was still there was foreclosed. I was evicted from my apartment in Portland and ended up living in my office for a short time because there was nowhere else to go, and really most days didn't really have enough money to eat.
Wow. And
so that was not very fun.
And Mindie, so at this point you were doing coaching, but it was the marketing wasn't there yet?
I mean, to be saying that I was doing coaching is even a stretch, because I was coaching a little bit, but I was so like, oh, I just want to help everybody and I'm all in the service aspect of it and blah, 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 that I wasn't getting enough clients, and those that I was getting, they weren't paying me a really good rate, so I just wasn't making enough to cover all of my different expenses. So that sucked big time, to put it
mildly,
lightly.
Yeah.
And what happened after that was I decided to file bankruptcy. Now that part to me was one of the most challenging decisions that I've ever had to make in my life, because to me, because I had always relied on my intellect and my street smarts and just personality and all this stuff, I'm like, I should be able to figure this out. What the hell is wrong with me?
Right.
That I first of all created this, and second of all can't figure out how to get out of it, because I should be able to do that.
It sounds to me, Mindie, like you're up in your head at this point.
Yeah, you think? And
I'm gonna go write a thesis now.
So I did end up filing bankruptcy, and that, like I said, was a really, really tough decision. It was a big hit to my ego, quite honestly. It was a time where I was comparing my self-worth to my net worth, which was, negative, in the negative numbers. And it was really hard. And I felt like the biggest fraud, because I'm thinking, okay, I'm teaching people about how to follow their dreams and live out their, best life and all this stuff. And what the hell am I doing?
Right.
It's not that. Now, what I realize now from this perspective, and, hindsight is 20/20, I'm able to say, you know what, for me, that was part of my path. It was part of my story and part of the experience at large. But let me tell you, it sucked to go through it.
Right. Yeah, many of these stories that I hear, it's one of those things where no one's like, yeah, I went bankrupt and I was super happy and psyched for when it all turned around.
Yeah, it
it's
was awesome.
like, yeah, it was just great and I was happy and I danced every day. It's like in the moment, there are a lot of shitty things that happen in life and like things that we do our best and things just don't happen to work out. And it's really easy to just kind of be like, all right, it's game over, man. I blew it. But in reality, like you've said, again, it's about the story. You're not on the wrong path. You didn't fall off the path. You're just in the next progression in your path. So it's about taking the next step. If you just continue to sit there, you're not going to be continuing on the path.
Exactly. And that's right on, is taking action is the only way to propel yourself forward. So that's what I had to start doing. I had to start learning about marketing. And, I just think about now how much I didn't know at the time. And I was like, oh, I'm going to run a business. I'm going to make this work. Like, I didn't know what the heck I was talking about. And so to think like, oh, geez, I was so naive. And yet, okay, that's where I was. That's my story. And I can't tell you how many people have now sat in my office across the table from me and been right at that same position where I was and saying, I really want to try and make this work, but I don't know what to do. And I'm able to say to them, well, I can help you because I've done that. I've been there and I've now come out of that. And here's how to do that. Here's how I did it. Let's brainstorm for how you can do it. And it gives me a whole different perspective than just if I had, started off and been this instantaneous success and been like, oh yeah, I didn't have any problems. Like, come on, it's the human experience to have obstacles and to have challenges. So to be able to meet someone empathetically and compassionately, having come from that, has been a really powerful experience.
Of course. And any time, what I found is like, something I noticed when my mom got sick and eventually passed away with cancer, it was, was and has been and is the hardest thing in my life, but the experiential learning that, not desired, one of those things I didn't want, but that learning has been so powerful. And also that ability to, like you said, empathetically connect, because when someone comes to you and says, dude, I just got dumped, and it's like, oh man, that's never happened to me. I've always had a kick-ass relationship, but that's probably rough. It's like the connection is minimal, but what I found is that many times in life, some of our deepest connections come in our struggles, in our downfalls, in our moments of weakness and fear and uncertainty, because when someone looks at you and goes, when someone looks at me now and goes, my mom just got diagnosed with cancer, or, my mom passed away from cancer, it's like I can say, and this is something that I've learned from you guys, is that you don't say, I know exactly what you're going through, because every situation is unique, but you say, I know this has got to be hard, and I went through it myself, and although our situations are different, I can relate to a lot of this. So, I'm here. It's like all of a sudden knowing that you're not the only one, that you did, like, especially like you said in your circumstance, when there's this feeling of kind of guilt or like you failed, knowing that you're not the only one, you're not alone, that this happens, and that also then when they're talking to you, they can see that it can be turned around in a beautiful way. Then all of a sudden there's this new hope, versus when you're just like, yeah, I've kicked ass all the time, and they're just like, God, I don't know what that's like. Your relatability goes up so much.
Yeah, and that's true in relationships too, as you mentioned, this idea of getting dumped. When Sean and I met, he had just had this traumatic, horrendous breakup where he found out that he had been cheated on, and his heart was ripped open, splayed out all over the place, and he was a mess in that department of life. And then we happened to meet at that time, and it was really incredible, just the instant connection, because we exchanged stories and conversation, all this stuff around that. But I don't think he would have been at that open, vulnerable space if that hadn't just happened, and thereby we may not have ended up connecting.
Yeah, it's amazing where it's a very interesting thing for me being, it's like being a young single guy, and I'm traveling a lot and I'm meeting lots of people, and it's that dating space is such an amazing topic, because there's so much that goes into it that we don't even, in college you just think just go out, drink, and meet girls, that's what you're supposed to do. But then as I've grown and learned more, it's like learning about yourself, learning about your self-worth, appreciating who you are, and growing to be the person that you're meant to be, and connecting with. It's amazing how things work out in life, and how connections come at some of the most unexpected times. But then even in that vulnerability, you're able to create deep connections. When you're putting on that superficial mask and be like, oh, I'm confident and cocky, I have no fears and insecurities, and it's like, and you meet a girl and she's into that, then all of a sudden, after a couple times hanging out, she goes, oh, wait, you have fears and doubts. And you're like, yeah, this is the real me. And so versus just bringing that up at first. So like you say, Sean was vulnerable at that point and kind of hurt, but that allowed him to open up and just be told. I mean, Sean's always, like, every time I've talked to him, he's super real to begin with, but that gives you an even deeper level of the vulnerable connection and openness.
Mm-hmm.
So
the depth at which he was feeling those things was so extreme, and that really allowed for the planting of what has become, this awesome relationship.
Mm-hmm. So before we move on from kind of the dark time of the entrepreneurial endeavor, if you have like 2 or 3 quick points for anybody who's starting a company, like what types of considerations do you wish you had made, or what types of things would you have loved to have known before starting your company so you could have evaded some of these challenges?
Yeah, I could probably list 8 million of them.
Okay, so everyone buckle up for an 8-hour interview.
No, but just a quick couple few. I would say, first and foremost, we touched on this briefly, but picking a niche. Who is it specifically? Very, very specifically, even to the extent of what is their name? Who is your customer avatar? Who is it that you want to help make a difference in their life? What do they do? What do they think about? Where do they go? What do they spend their time reading? And, what kind of information do they like? All that kind of stuff. You need to know that. And not in this broad sense, but actually think about it as if it was just one person. And if you could serve just one single person, what would be their makeup, their demographics, everything? Because then the more directly and specifically you can speak to that one person, that is going to be, as you said earlier, Brian, when they're scrolling through their websites or whatever and finding that, they're like, oh man, this person's talking right to me. Mm-hmm. And they're going to be more likely to say, yes, I'd love to hire you, I'd love to work with you, etc. So picking a customer avatar would have been huge for me, but I thought, hey, I'd like to help everybody. The reality is you cannot help everybody. By trying to help everybody, you're actually diluting your message so much and diminishing the power that you have. It's like taking a spoon versus a knife. A knife is much stronger to cut through paper because it is targeted and focused. Mm-hmm. So we need to do that with our marketing, and that's one of the things that I wish I would have known. I also would have made some different choices in terms of the ways that I handled my money. Mm-hmm. And one being, I probably would not have taken out every cent from my IRA. That was not a smart idea because of the tax ramifications that happen when you do that. Mm-hmm. When you're less than retirement age. That's not necessarily a good thing. Granted, you can use that money to leverage, and that essentially is what I did. It was a hard decision, but if I could have done it a different way, I probably should have done that. The other thing is really just managing money as it does come in. I've started, and now this is a system that Sean and I continue to use because I had to learn it, but T. Harv Eker gives a money management system that I think is the most easy and super convenient. And just very briefly, it's about creating 6 jars or 6 envelopes in which you put your money. Mm-hmm. And that can either be a real jar or a real envelope, or I just use a spreadsheet. Right. So anytime money comes in, I'm dividing it into these different categories, which one is financial freedom, which you never, ever, ever touch. It's just eventually the idea is to be able to live on the interest. Mm-hmm. One is long-term savings that can either be for a big purchase like a house, a car, or to pay off extra debt. Mm-hmm. Then there's necessities. And then there's a fun or play category. Mm-hmm. And the reason that's so important is because most people, when they're struggling financially, they don't do anything fun or they don't play at all. Right. And this gives you a break. And so even if it's a very minimal amount, you can figure out something to do with that money. Mm-hmm. Then there's education, and then there's a give fund, which is just for donations or giving to whomever, friends, family, etc. And so it's pretty easy. The necessity is 55%. All the other ones except give are 10%, and then give is 5%, mm-hmm. unless you are a crazy person like I am, and I'm big, crazy passionate about charities, and I love donations, so I do 10% for give, but that's just my personal choice. But it just makes it so simple, and when there is a structure for money to flow into, money flows into it more effortlessly and easily.
Mm-hmm. And for all the listeners, if you think about the times that you're most uncomfortable in your life, it's generally when you feel like you don't know what's going on. And so for finances, that's most people out there. Like, don't know, like, I've had to start educating myself. What is a 401k? What's a Roth IRA? Fortunately, my brother is a financial advisor, and he's helping me a lot. And he's like, no, Brian, don't do that. And he's saying, all right, you definitely want to do this. And he's incredibly intelligent, insanely hardworking. So, you know, the advice I'm getting from him is just super high quality. But think about any of the things in your life where it's like you're trying to maintain a workout routine or a diet. When you create a structure and there's some kind of support that you have, then all you have to do is follow that. Just stick to that regimen, stick to that program, and it gives you the results. And if it doesn't, you modify and tweak. And most of us don't do this with finances, and it's just kind of like, I have X amount of money in the bank, and that's what I have. And
yeah, or even if you, like, some people don't even know that. They're like, well, I don't even know. I don't keep track of that stuff. I'm like,
right.
No, you have to know the numbers.
Yeah, because like you said, when you, like, some people think, I don't want to obsess about my finances and become all about money. It's like, well, when you set up a structure like what Mindie just described, then you don't have to worry about it as much. You're able to automate certain things. And when that's taken care of, that pulls a lot of the stress out of it, which money is one of the things that people stress about the most in the world. And I mean, there's a lot of times where I'm like, I need more. And then I'm checking myself. I'm like, all right, why do you need more? And it's like, well, I want things. And why do you want things? Like, and digging in.
Yeah, and you know what? Honestly, that's not even a bad thing. Like, I think that's great to continue to want more and to continue to want to push yourself and grow. But it's a lot easier to gain that excess if you have the structure in which it can flow into.
Right. And that's something that I've learned in, like in my routines of waking up early or working with my coach, Peter Scott. It's like having a structure, having tracking, having clear visibility. It makes it a lot easier. And also what it helps you to do, there's a lot of times where you think like, oh, I'm not doing well and I'm really blowing it. And then if you go back and actually look at the numbers and look at the results, you're like, oh, okay, it's really not as bad. Or it's actually looking pretty great. So it helps you to keep like a check there. So, all right, to dive back into your story, Mindie. So, now, we've talked a little bit about Heartpath, and I know we've only got a few more minutes because you've got to take your lovely husband out for dinner.
I've got a hot date tonight.
Oh, look out, world. All right. So details on that. I feel like I should get like one of those big swing mics and like, all right, so we're on the nighttime hour.
Yeah, let me tell you. I'll tell you how exciting it's going to be. We're going to go to Target because he wants to buy new clothes.
Oh.
And then we're going to go eat Chinese food. So it's really, pretty exciting.
Mindie, I would appreciate it if you didn't brag on my show about these expensive places you're going to. Target is pretty, all right.
Got it.
So, all right, now knowing that you guys got to go to dinner, I think we'll do one more question just about your story. Then I have 2 questions I close out with, and then you can go enjoy your Kung Pao chicken. So, all right. So I want to dig in a little because we've touched on your coaching, we've touched on the ups and downs. What I'd like to get into just a little bit more because I know how much, I've seen you in person and how you just light up when you talk about it. So I want to talk a little bit more about Heartpath. So can you give the listeners a little more background on what it's about, what it's structured like, and also when the next one is, so hopefully we can get some other people applying and coming out.
Heck yeah, I'd love to do that. So Heartpath started as a dream. I used to go to Sedona probably every year for different trainings when I worked in corporate, and I just loved the area. And I just would think, man, if I could bring people here, if I could bring groups here, I know that they would have a transformational experience. So that dream probably started, I don't know, 2008, 2009, somewhere around that. The first one wasn't until 2011, so it took a couple of years to actually get this thing going. But what Heartpath is essentially is it is that mix of the heart intelligence, so the science of all of that. We do a deep dive into the science, and I hook people up to the heart monitors so they can actually see what's going on in their own body and see how one body can influence another body and all this cool stuff. It's really, really fascinating. And the wilderness portion. So we go hiking, as I mentioned, we do starlight meditations, that kind of stuff. And really the gist of the whole experience is that you need to learn these 4 heart keys, which I've developed as ways and things to help open the heart And, people say, oh, well, why do I need to open my heart? Who cares? Whatever. That sounds kind of woo-woo or kind of, cheesy. But really what it's about is it's about opening to that intuition. It's about digging into that greater power source. If you think about the word heart, way back in the day, it came from this word, the word heart in Latin was cor, C-O-R. And core, throughout history, has turned into words like courage. In French, the word cœur is for heart. Our word in English, courage, is from that word heart. So I'm saying, okay, if we can get underneath the fears, the insecurities, all the crap that holds us back in our mind, and get underneath that into this courage source or this power source, that's going to be this great propelling force to go do something out into the world. And what we need to do is figure out what that is. So I do 3 parts, because a lot of people will say, oh, well, this is how you figure out what you should do. Just what are you good at and what are you passionate about? Cool.
Right.
Just put those together and that's it. Well, I'm like, hold on, you're missing a whole big portion of the puzzle here. And that is, what is a need of the world that you care enough about to want to do something or to impact it? Because that need is like an open space or an open vacuum almost, waiting for you to get your act together to go and fulfill it, to go and help, to go and do something for those people or those dolphins or those whatevers. It doesn't matter what it is, but there are so many needs in the world, and we need to figure out how our talents and our passions filter into meeting the needs of something going on out there. So really, that's what it's all about.
And I love that. I mean, I think that's fantastic. And it's one of those things, I've never heard of that specific event until talking with you and learning about what it is you do and how you do it. So it's fascinating. And for the listeners, I really want to call out, so some of you might be like, well, that's woo-woo, opening your heart, and, I'm a man, I don't need to open my heart, I'm tough, whatever. And it's like, imagine being at the point where you didn't spend your day questioning and thinking and doubting, that you had this sense of knowing about just about everything you do, and that you were trusting in yourself, and that you just went for the things you wanted to. Imagine having that freedom, not having this weight of just constantly second guessing and doubting and being uncertain, and just understanding that you've got everything you need right now you are the person you need to be right now, and embracing that, loving that, and then just bringing that out into the world. Because like Mindie said, there are so many needs out there, and I want every single person listening to hear this clearly. I don't care who you are, what your background is, where you come from. You have a unique gift that the world needs. You have something to offer that no one else can offer. No one has lived in your shoes and lived your exact story and had your exact experiences. So it just takes some time to look inside yourself and see what is that message you've got that you want to share that can touch people's lives. So, Mindie, that sounds fantastic. When is the next Heartpath event?
The next one is October, the first weekend of October.
Okay.
And it's basically every year. So every fall we do one. And it's a very, very small group, usually 20 people at the max. And so it's, if anyone's interested, I recommend they get on that right away and check it out.
And I'll include the links and everything so that people will be able to go to the show notes and click in to register. Because as Mindie said, it is an exclusive event. It is a small group. And Mindie does that deliberately so that there is open space for people to feel that transformational energy and really have a life-changing experience. And Mindie, just a little fun fact for you, you said the Latin word for heart is cor.
C-O-R.
Okay, well in Spanish it's corazón, so it starts with cor,
Yep,
and in Portuguese it's coração, so it starts with cor, so it's in, and those are Latin-based languages, so that makes sense. But
exactly.
All right, so to close out, I mean, this has been a lot of fun, Mindie. This hour flew by. I was like, is it really an hour?
That's good.
So this has been a lot of fun, and I want to talk to you about a lot more things, but we can always do other episodes. So this is a new question. This was not a part of the original closeout, but my dad presented this one to me, and I really loved the idea. And so the first question of the closeout is, many times we, as millennials, me being in this generation, we look at what we're doing and we're like, how can I bring value to people? Like, how can I, you look at the job requirements for these corporations, you're like, they want 5 years experience. Like, I don't have that. I don't have anything to offer them. So can you talk a little bit about what you believe this young new generation has to offer to the world? Not just the corporate world, but what this new generation has to offer the world.
Yeah, I actually love this question because I have something very specific to say around what you just said with job requirements. Let me tell you this. As you know, my undergrad was in theology. So I went to work for a pharmaceutical company. And on the job requirements, they said you need to have a degree in science, which I did not have, and you need to have 3 to 5 years of industry experience, which I did not have. So my message to all of you out there is that really what people are looking for when they are hiring folks like you is someone who can think on their feet, someone who is personable, someone who's going to be a hard worker and will get shit done and just really rock for them. Because the rest of the stuff is teachable.
Right.
So if you get in and you can shine in your interviews by just showing them who you are and what you can offer them in terms of your personality, your mindset, that kind of stuff, that is way stronger than any of the technical things on your resume. Because let me tell you, I didn't have any of the stuff that they were looking for. And it didn't matter. There was like over 100 applicants for my position, and I got that. So it really doesn't matter. So that's ultimately what they are looking for. So my advice to you is to bring out the best parts of you in that regard. Not necessarily all the details of, you know, if you have them, great. But if you don't, that's okay too. I say just go for it. And that's what's cool about millennials is you guys have a really, it's just this this gumption of like, I'm going to go try it, you know, I'm going to go figure this out because you guys are smart cookies and you can figure it out. So just having that inner motivation to do a really good job, that's going to be the key thing. Because I think that is one thing that people tend to look at millennials or younger folks these days. They're like, they don't really want to work. I've read this on magazine and all these different, you know, entrepreneurial things. They're like, oh, millennials, they don't want to do anything. I have not found that to be true. I know that I've hired millennials that are interns for me or other positions, and it's always been awesome. So just make sure that you let that part of you be showcased, and I think you'll be set.
Yeah, that whole concept of they're entitled and they don't want to work and all that, I'm sure there's people that hold into that stereotype, but for all the people listening, there's going to be people trying to define you and group you and put you into a box, stereotype you your entire life. Do you want to be a stereotype and an average, or do you want to be the outlier who's living a badass, crazy, awesome, insane, amazing life? That is your choice. So go ahead and make that good choice and just go for what your heart brain is telling you, not upstairs. We got to make a name for it. There's got to be like some sexy name for the Brainopolis or something. I don't know.
Brainopolis.
So his Brainopolis was, yeah, see? I mean, it works. I could see it on a medical show, but
yeah, we'll figure it out.
All right. So now we will hit our closing question, and then I'll do my little outro for you. So the closing question, I love to ask this question because it's really interesting to see kind of the insights that people provide to themselves. So the closing question is, if you could go back and talk to yourself at that first point at your undergrad graduation and give yourself advice, what would that advice be?
The advice I would give myself would be to hold as strongly as I possibly could to the dreams in my heart. And, you know, I think that part of the reason why it took so long to get to Africa for me and some other of my, quote, dreams was because I allowed myself to get distracted by other things. And if I could have held really tightly to those and kept taking action steps toward those things, I think that they would have happened probably sooner or maybe more effortlessly than they did. So that would be my advice to all of you guys, is just really hold strong to those dreams, to those passions, because they're all for a purpose. They're not just these random ideas that you have floating around.
Right. Oh, that's beautiful, Mindie. I love that. And I've found that in my life, the times where I'm telling myself, no, like I shouldn't, I can't, it's like I'm holding on to something, some belief, there's some reason that I'm trying to keep myself here, and oftentimes it's fear. So when you let go of that fear, you let go of that need to control everything, all of a sudden, like Mindie said, things start to happen magically. And I've started to experience this in my life, and things fall into place in a way where you're just like, really? Like Mindie said, they're like, yeah, we'll give you a year paid, and then you can get severance. I was just waiting for you to be like, oh, and you can work from Africa if you want to.
Right?
So whatever it is out there, just like Mindie said, be willing to embrace it. Just love it. Love yourself for wanting it, and then find a way. So, Mindie, this has been fantastic. This has been so much fun. I don't want to let you go, but we both need to eat. So, because I know people are going to want to find out more about you and hear more about your story, what are the best places for them to go to find out more about Mindie Kniss?
Yeah, thanks for that. My website is mindiekniss.com, MindieKniss.com. And I would say the next best place would be my Facebook page, which is at facebook.com/Kniss. I'm pretty active on that. I don't typically use my profile very much, so my page is where all the action's happening.
Okay, great. So for the listeners, all of the show notes for today's episode will be capturing all of the links. You can find Mindie's page, her Facebook page, and also I'll include the link to the meditation that Mindie will be sharing with me after the interview. And I'm excited to try that one out for myself, Mindie. So,
awesome.
For everyone listening, and if this is your first time, you can subscribe to the Overcoming Graduation podcast by searching on iTunes or on Stitcher for Overcoming Graduation. You can also check out the Overcoming Graduation and the OCG community at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you'd like to reach out to me directly, you can contact me at brian@overcominggraduation.com. If you'd like to provide feedback, inquire about speaking events, or just give me tell me that you loved an episode or whatever. I'd love to hear from you. So that's going to be it for today, guys. Thank you all for listening in, and thank you, Mindie, again for being here. So we'll close out for now. Mindie's got a hot date. I got to get some food, and that'll be it. So, Mindie, thank you so much.
Thank you, Brian. It's been awesome.
All right, guys. You have a great night.